Hello everyone and welcome back to the book club. Today we are talking about this book, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. So let's get into it. This book is an 800 and something page sci-fi book. Sci-fi and fantasy have always been my two genre loves for TV, movies, and books. The more fantastical it is, the better, which is why I always love these genres and I always love series like this. One of the first books I ever read that I truly fell in love with when I was in middle school was a dystopian sci-fi book. And so I've been hooked for years on anything and everything. I am really excited to talk about this book with you guys today. This book is only Christopher Paolini's second series that he's ever written. Eragon is the only other series he's ever published next to this. So I was really excited to see that he had released this. I actually saw the release of the other book in the series, which made me want to read this. So I'm really excited. I was not disappointed at all. So I'm really hyped to talk about this with you guys. This book is no joke. It is 800 something pages long and it is a lot. It is a lot. It is a lot. I would say something that happens a lot with sci-fi and fantasy, but especially sci-fi, is there's a lot of explaining you have to do. In sci-fi, because it's supposed to be, science-based or futuristic, there usually has to be some sort of explanation for how the technology works, what it looks like. It has to be something at least comparable to what we would expect. Like you have to keep it within something that you can imagine, but it's also meant to be fantastical and out of this world. And so a lot of the times, sci-fi books with the amount of kind of research that has to go into it can make sci-fi books really difficult to not only read, but to execute. And so I'm really excited to see how well this book was written. This book is about a young woman. Her name is Kira. She is a xenobiologist. Her and different teams of people who work for the government go out to these new planets, to these new solar systems, to turn different planets into habitable environments for, the future of the human race. The book begins at the end of one of her and her team's missions where they are on this planet called Adrastia. And they are, about to wrap up. They're about to leave this planet. She's happy with her boyfriend who's just proposed to her and so on and so on. And everyone's partying, celebrating the success of their mission. She's in a happy relationship. She's doing well at her job. She has friends. She's excited for what's next in her life, which for the sake of a plot in a book means that something has to go wrong. So Kira's pulled away on this mission to go off and find a lost drone. They're all packed up. They're all ready to leave the planet and go on to the next mission. But before they leave, Kira has to go out and get this drone that, fell or collapsed or broke or something out somewhere else on the planet. Kira goes out there to find this drone, and as she is walking from where she lands to go to the drone, she notices this really strange structure of pillars up against the mountain that doesn't make sense with the landscape at all. So she goes to inspect it, of course, because one thing I really like about Kira is that she is a scientist, and so there's always this kind of urge for her to figure out what's going on, which is really fun to see. And as she's approaching the structure, she falls in. And inside, there's this weird, very clearly, built by aliens or someone. It's clearly been built, and there's like a pedestal on the inside that has this black dust. And as she approaches it, she goes to touch it, and it attaches to her. And there's this kind of nightmarish scene of it crawling up her body and consuming her body. And then she passes out. So a very strong beginning. In the beginning, it's very clear that the humans have yet to find sentient life. They know of a structure that proves that someone may have built something. It's called the beacon. And it's the closest they've ever come to finding an intelligent species otherwise. In a different world, this would have made her career, but the way it's went has actually become her worst nightmare. After Kira is kind of consumed by this mysterious black dust from the tunnel, she wakes up 4 weeks later out of cryo, back in her lab with the people she's been working with, only to discover that the 4 weeks that she was unconscious, a lot of things went wrong. They're under complete quarantine. They're not allowed to leave and go on their next mission like they thought they were going to because Kira is contaminated with this alien dust. You know, they don't know if she's sick, they don't know if she's encountered an illness or a full-blown alien, or just her being in the structure could expose her to something dangerous. So their entire unit is on lockdown, no one can leave. This is when we first are introduced to the UMC, which is the United Military Command. So they are, you know, the big bad government in this book, which there always has to be one, especially in sci-fi. So they are, you know, keeping this entire planet on lockdown, and they're not allowed to leave. And Kira is being blamed for a lot of this. If she hadn't gone to look at that structure, if she hadn't let the curiosity get the better of her, you know, this never would have happened. They'd all be able to go home. Kira's having a lot of anxiety, of course, in the beginning, because she's being blamed for everything that's happening. You know, they can't leave, they can't move on with their lives, they have to stay on lockdown, they can't have a real meal. And so Kira finally goes to actual sleep after being out of cryo now, and she's in quarantine, and she has this nightmare of a different solar system somewhere that she's never seen, and it's dying, it's desolate, and in the middle of this kind of nightmare, she wakes up, and her teammate who had saved her from the cave is coughing, and they're rushing her to the infirmary, and she starts coughing, and she heaves up this black gooey mass, and it starts moving. Kira's standing there, and it says her nails had dug into her skin so deeply it carved furrows in her flesh, crimson gashes that ended with crumpled strips of skin, and within the furrows she saw another something twitch. So not only is her teammate clearly being sick, but it's affected her as well, and she sees underneath her skin something moving. In the very beginning, when I was reading how this starts to unfold, I was really worried that this was going to be like a gory horror space epic kind of novel, and I do not do good with horror themes. So I was really nervous about that, because the beginning of this book is incredibly intense, but it gets better, don't worry. Kira and her teammate are both brought to the infirmary, which in this book they refer to as sick bay, that they have on all the ships. And so they're brought, you know, they're laid down on these beds, and Kira is panicking. She is completely freaking out because there's something, you know, alive inside of her. The tension continues to build in this scene. You know, there are people around her telling her not to freak out, but they're freaking out. This is straight out of Alien. Okay, these extensions, these spikes, these spindles, these tentacles or whatever, start to extrude from different parts of her body, and they begin killing her teammates in front of her. The feeling becomes so intense for her that as this nightmare is unfolding in front of her, she passes out. And when she wakes up, there's this scene that I still can't get the scene out of my head. There's this scene of one of these spikes that has extruded from her body into her fiance, and her fiance died leaning over her. And so now this spike is through him, and she wakes up with him resting against her. Do you ever read a book where it starts off with like a cold open scene like that, where a lot of like violence happens? This is especially common in like horror themes, or like if you imagine every opening scene to Supernatural ever, where it's like there's this random scene of a completely normal person doing something, and it's interrupted by this beast, and it kills everyone. And you're like, oh, I thought that was going to be the main character, and I thought I was going to like them, but now they're all dead. And then it cuts to the actual rest, you know what I mean? Like, it changes point of view. I really thought that that's what was going to have to happen here, because in the first 3 chapters, everyone that we were talking to and that we met is dead. So I really thought that we were just going to have to switch points of view. I was like, there is no point. I was like, everyone I just thought was going to be important to the story is dead. But we move on to the book, and Kira wakes up in this ship called the Extenuating Circumstances. So when Kira wakes up on this ship after the attack that has happened with all of her friends, she wakes up and her entire skin is covered in this. It's explained throughout the book as this obsidian-like, you know, glass-like skin suit that's on top of her. Her body is completely different than it was, covered in this weird alien suit. She's been taken under quarantine by the UMC in the ship, the Extenuating Circumstances, and Dr. Carr is experimenting on her. And the UMC is saying that, you know, Kira can only be safe once they figure out what the cure is, how to get rid of it, once they understand the suit more, because other people who have been on the planet, and including the UMC who were there to quarantine it, could have been exposed, and they could be next, you know, having deadly spikes come out of them and kill other people as well. So for the safety of everyone, she has to stay in this quarantine being tested on. And this portion of the book is pretty sad just because Kira's all alone. She's being tested like an animal, and it's really ironic because in this part of the book, she describes, feeling alone and being upset and have nothing but her thoughts. And this book came out in 2020 when everyone was in quarantine. So I thought that was pretty ironic how that unfolded, because it was very relatable, actually, the way that she was talking about being in quarantine. And she continues to be experimented on. They make pretty little progress. The suit protects her skin from any needles or tests. It's hard enough that it blocks out different needles or machinery that they try to get with her, and they notice that it adapts to different things. You get this inkling that the suit is alive because it has the ability to change, but she can't talk to it. So you kind of have this weird introduction to this very alien thing. One of my favorite things about the writing in this book is that you get these continual hints that more is going to happen, but it's given to you very piece by piece. If you have the patience for it, it pays off, and this book is so good. But it takes a lot of patience. This is a big book, and there is a lot of this, I would say this much of the book is just trying to get a grasp of what's going on. So Kira's being tested on, and ironically, after a few nights on the ship, she wakes up to these alarms going off, and the ship is being invaded by more aliens. So mind you, the human race has never actually seen aliens face to face yet, and now their ship is being invaded for Kira. She has this weird sense from the Xeno, is what she calls it. She has this weird sense that these aliens are bad guys and they gotta go. So we follow the scene of them going to escape the ship. Kira encounters not only Dr. Carr, the man that's been experimenting on her, but one of these weird tentacled aliens on her way to an escape pod. It's Kira's first face off with the alien, and she ends up blowing a hole in the side of the ship, which sends the alien and Dr. Carr flying out the side of the ship. Very unfortunate, very sad. And in this whole process, she blows off a piece of the suit from the side of her. And she has another inkling that, the suit can tell now that a piece of it is missing, and kind of all these pieces fly off into space. And she feels that urge that now a piece of the suit is missing, but of course, life or death, so she just keeps on keeping on. And after a bunch more intense stuff happens, she finally makes her way onto an escape pod back towards a populated solar system. This portion of the book acts as the introduction. These few chapters in the beginning here, which is part 1 of the book, is I would consider the prologue, where you're getting a majority of the necessary information that you need for the rest of the book. And it's incredibly entertaining, but it doesn't lay out much for the long-term plot. We don't really understand who the real villain is going to be in the end. Is it the government? Is it the aliens? Is it this weird weapon suit that she's wearing? We don't know. Something I have learned to adore about this book. So this book is split up into, I think it's 5 parts. Each part of the story mirrors the previous part. So in part 2, Kira is rescued by the Wallfish, and this is where we meet the crew that we'll be spending the rest of the book with. Falcone is the ship's general, and he is the most important of the characters. We also meet Sparrow, Hua Yung, Vishal. Gregorovich is my favorite character, and we'll get into that. We have this crew that we'll now be spending the rest of the book with. Once Kira is rescued by the Wallfish, war has broken out between the weird tentacle aliens and the humans. And so after spending some time on this refugee ship that she's now been saved by, she convinces the crew to board the aliens, which they call jellies. She convinces them that with her suit, she has some knowledge or some connection to them, and that they need to get access to one of the defeated ships so that way she can try and learn more about the suit that's on her. The crew offers to join her and try and figure it out, because if they can help in the war, if they can get some money out of it for their ship and all this stuff, at this point, they've all got their own motives, and they'll do whatever it takes to take care of themselves and their ship, and Kira is offering them that. And one thing we'll notice, it starts with this in part 2, that every part following has a similar situation where they are attempting to make a difference in the war. Someone is injured, and then there's a bad conclusion to it all, is how every part goes of this book going forward. So in this part, they board the jelly ship trying to look for information. Kira finds this weird thing on the wall of the jelly ship. It seems to me, like their communicator. They communicate differently, and she is trying to figure out how it works, and she's been feeling this kind of tug and this pull towards it, and without even realizing, she responds to this random signal that she's been feeling this pull to. And this is when the situation, even though we're already at war, continues to escalate, and a new alien joins the fight. It says that these ships, they look alive, and the aliens that come out of them are made of mangled flesh. They're these desperate animalistic creatures, and they're called the Nightmares. Not only now do we have to worry about the jellies trying to hunt down Kira, but we're also introduced to these mangled, barbaric messes of aliens, and they're both very clearly hunting Kira. And Kira sees this vision for this thing called the Staff of Blue. And she has these visions, which she realizes are memories from the suit, that the Staff of Blue can control the suit and destroy planets and a bunch of crazy stuff. And so they decide that they need to go get the Staff of Blue before the jellies do, so they don't gain control over everything. Part 2 ends with them going back into cryo onto another long flight to the solar system called Bug Hunt is where they're going, and each part of the book ends when they take back off into unknown space, essentially. So part 2 ends when they are sent off into space to go find the Staff of Blue. Going into part 3, they go to this planet, which they've called Bug Hunt for the staff. They find this planet with these huge city-like, building structures. They're walking through an old abandoned city from some sentient alien centuries ago, blah, blah, blah. And they locate the Staff of Blue, and it's broken. And that's about how this whole book goes. Everything goes wrong. Now they're looking for the Staff of Blue. Now Trig, who is our young and lively and comedic young character, is injured. In the part 2, it was Sparrow who was injured. And now in this part, Trig is injured. We also we reunite with someone from the UMC who we know, who explains that the jellies are broken up in between the people who want to eradicate the human race and the rebel jellies who want to rise up against their government and team up with Kira and her powerful suit to take them down. And kind of in this revelation, when we're learning more about the jellies and we're learning more about the suit, we figure out that earlier on in the book, when Kira blew Dr. Carr and that jelly and a piece of her suit out of the ship, the suit attached to Dr. Carr and attached to the jelly, and in a desperate attempt at survival of the 3 of those items, of those beings trying to survive, they combined to form a creature that they call the Maw, which is the creator of all nightmares. Kira lives with this guilt that the piece of the suit that broke off of her is responsible for creating the nightmares, which are killing jellies and killing humans and committing a lot of casualties to this war. At this point in the book, we're learning some really important stuff, that Kira has a little bit of control over the Xeno, and that some of the aliens are good and some of the aliens are bad, and the nightmares are created by her mistake. But what I really like is that I can't even begin to tell the story in a good way, because it's written out in such microscopic puzzle pieces over hundreds of pages. It's so hard to explain, but this book is so good. We're trying to figure out what's going on with the suit, and we see Kira slowly growing into her ability to control the suit, that they work as a team. And you also have this aspect where she is growing closer to the people on her team, and these people on the Wallfish who start out as kind of, weird kooky strangers, and they end up becoming her family, and they would do anything for each other. And I think it's really hard to write so many aspects of a story like this well, but you get the different cultures and opinions of the jellies, you get the different cultures and opinions of different people from different parts of the galaxy, how different humans live. And you have, internal struggle with Kira, you have her trauma from killing people that she loved in the very beginning, as well as her growing into someone who can control the suit and who would do anything to end this war that she started. But something that was really big for me is we're working through this book, and you get so many hundreds of pages in, and you finally learn that it's actually Kira who accidentally created the nightmares, and it's supposed to be this huge revelation. I was missing a deeper feeling from her. I really wanted to be able to resonate with the pain that she should be going through, having discovered aliens, having started a war, having killed people that she loved. I would expect her to be feeling like a lot of feelings on the inside. And I was waiting for that for a really long time. And I even wrote in my notes, I was like, you know, I kind of wish I could like Kira more, but she just kind of seems really distant from everything that's happening, which I was worried was a flaw in the writing. But here, halfway through the book on page 482, I marked it, my tab here. In my notes, it says, I've been waiting for this. But we finally have an emotional break. 400 pages in. This is why you need to be patient with this book. This is when I start to love this story. Actually, she finally trusts Falcone, who is the captain of the ship, enough. They've become close enough friends that she finally admits everything. She's been keeping all these secrets about what she's learned and about what she's done because she feels guilty. She feels guilty for killing her friends. She feels guilty for starting a war and for being responsible for all this bad stuff. But she finally starts to tell the truth to him because she trusts him. And then we go through this thing where she says, now that she'd started confessing, Kira couldn't stop. And she continues to admit all these things. And one thing that I think is really interesting is she's so humanized here. Like, I absolutely fell in love with her here. I thought she was just this cold, calculated, whatever scientist from the future, and I didn't really like her that much. But we go through this whole dialogue where she starts stuttering and sobbing, and it's explained that, you know, she finally has this break and she can't stop confessing her feelings that she's been holding back this whole time. And suddenly it's so relatable. You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly what a lot of people would do, but it's written so well that her calm, cool, and collectedness is shown to us as readers as well, and we don't even get the full extent of how she's feeling until this moment, which I love. I was really, really excited and like really rooting for her in this moment. I was so excited about that. So I'm really, really happy with how that was written, because from this point on, the book gets so much better. I don't want to over explain the plot because, again, I won't be able to do it justice, and I really hope that you guys, if you haven't read the book along with me, that you read it too. So I'll try not to babble on too much about the actual plot of the story. Something that's really important is how she learns to control the Xeno, right? So that's something that grows with her, is her ability to not only control it, but not fear it and work with it. And the Xeno, the suit, has its own wants, has its own things that it wants to achieve, and we never really get the full idea of that. And Kira is too afraid of hurting somebody to give in to whatever the suit would want. And what we discover towards the end of the book is that because she's been missing this piece of the suit to the Maw, because these two pieces are not together, they could both very easily create chaos and evil and malice, especially in the wrong hands, right? So you have this broken piece of suit that is not whole and creates something that is not whole. And her, as a person who's not willing to trust the suit, can't create the things that she wants to create with it either. You know, they're not fully harmonized, her and the suit. And it's very clear with the visions that she has that that is an important piece of this puzzle. We work our way through some intense battles, more war, giant aliens. It's very good, very entertaining. 10 out of 10. So we're going through these battles, we are completing out this war, and we get to the end. We get to the apex here of the plot, which is when she finally gets to face down, not killing the leader of the jelly government, which is a whole other thing in its own, but facing off against the Maw, which is the evil that she unintentionally created. And so we are at the point where this huge, disgusting alien ship comes in, and she can sense with this relationship she's built with the Xeno that that is the Maw, and the piece of her that is missing is that ship. And essentially you have this weird, this book is a little gruesome. I'll just say that now. If you didn't get my drift from some of the things earlier, it is a little bit violent. And there is some explicit gory stuff. But the image, I think, is very needed for the mood that we're trying to get across. But just, you know, be warned. Kira comes into contact with this ship, which is a giant living mass of flesh. And the whole point is that it is this truly malicious evil thing that wants more, and it wants to be an all-consuming being. It's an incomplete being that never feels complete and is constantly wanting to consume more and more. Kira has this revelation, again, only because of the relationship she's built with the Xeno and its past and its memories. She knows that the only way to make this work is if her and her missing piece that's been a part of the Maw can become one again. And it's this enlightening scene where she absorbs this piece of the suit, and she fights and fights and fights, not to be consumed by the maw, but to consume the maw and be whole with the Xeno. It's this huge event where she becomes whole, and she fully now becomes one with the Xeno. And we never truly understood its ability or its power until this point, now that it's whole again. The Xeno is meant to create and build life, and that's what she learns. She can practically just create life and plants and structures out of thin air. Like, she can pull materials from the very universe around her and create things. And she is being driven, now that she is like fully bonded with the Xeno, her and its purpose are one and the same. And you have this, and there's this really interesting way of it being written at the end, where she refers to herself as, it's like he, her, it really wanted to make this structure. They, she, he really wanted to, where it's referring to her, the suit, and all of the suit's past selves, and the pieces of the jelly mind and Dr. Carr's mind that are now a part of her. Kira is essentially now this elevated being where she can essentially create life. And she creates out of quite literally thin air, practically, a giant space station that is meant to be a place for life and for peace. Because she's realizing now that not only is that's something that she has loved and adored and always wanted, but that is the purpose of the suit. And her purpose now and the Xeno's purpose are aligned. They create this giant spaceship for everyone to live on. All people of either jellies or humans are allowed to live there. And Kira is essentially a god. Like, this whole last bit of the book is so surreal. After everything she's been through, she's just like a whole person. And it's really incredible writing, actually, because I think it is incredibly synonymous to what a lot of people feel going through just hardships in general, but I think it's written in a really epic sci-fi way, which is very cool. You know, at this point in the book, you have the jellies and the humans who are, you know, classic. The humans are like, oh, we'll see. Like, I don't know if I can leave my guns at home, but we'll try. You know, and the jellies who are like, they bow down to the suit and they're like, absolutely, thank you for this honor. And then there's a scene where it's like the Wizard of Oz, and she gives out gifts to all her friends, and she's like, this is to help you do this. This is to help you with this. This is to help you with this. And it's very moving and it's very beautiful, but it's a big shift from what was just happening several chapters before. The thing that makes me excited about this is so much happened, so much changed in this little bit of the book at the end that I'm like not ready for it to be over. Kira's created this surreal, beautiful, perfect world for everyone to live in, and then she has this remembrance of the Maw, right? Because now she is combined with the consciousnesses that were the Maw and the nightmares, and she is recalling that, oops, that the Maw created 7. Now it's turning into Harry Potter. The Maw has created 7 pieces of itself to continue to grow the nightmares, because the Maw always hungered for more and wanted to ensure that it could always take more. So it created these 7, mini Maws with pieces of itself to be able to continue to make nightmares. And of course we can't have that happen because they would decimate the entire universe. And so the book ends. The last part of the book ends like every part of the book ended, which is with Kira flying off into space to complete a crazy mission. You also have some mysterious guy who like flies by her in a spaceship and is like, oh, your family's alive, and then zoops off into space, and they just leave it at that. So I'm gonna need a second book to explain that, please and thank you. I have a lot of thoughts. There is so much of this book that I wish I could have gone into more detail on, but there's so much to talk about. First things first is that I'm really excited for another book of this. There's so much happened in this book. I already gave you my most bare bones explanation, and that was a lot of words. So I'm really excited to read more of this. It's so good, and I love a good sci-fi book. The thing that stinks is that the book that was published in this universe is not the second book, but a prequel. Am I going to read it? Absolutely. Of course I'm going to read it. However, I thought I was going to be able to jump into the second book right away, but it turns out I can't. So that's a bummer. So help me keep an eye out for the second book of this, please. Please, because I'm so excited for when that happens. I have to know more. Something else that's really interesting is I was really worried as I was getting towards the end, like, and you can kind of tell they're starting to set something up to leave it as a cliffhanger for a second book. I was worried because at the end, Kira kind of became a god. You know what I mean? Like, she can create life. She can make anything out of anything. And she's like this person who's at peace, and she's not worried with the trivial questions that the humans ask her. She's always like, it's fine, you stupid human. We'll figure it. I already know the answer to all your, here's a cure for this incurable thing that you have. You know, like, she has very much a godlike power now that she has become whole with her Xeno, with the soft blade. I was kind of worried about how that would play into a second book, only because it makes her less relatable of a main character, and that's just harder to read. Is it dope? Yeah, it's super dope, but it's not as easy to root for someone that you don't really relate to, because now she's just at god status, you know? But don't worry, the author, we fixed this. And so before she leaves on this mission to go hunt down these 7 other pieces of the Maw, she leaves a piece of herself behind. Not separate, not broken like the first time, but a piece of her behind to allow, you know, this giant planetary space station that she's built to continue to thrive while she's not there. I don't know, that's a very hard thing for me to piece together in my small brain, and so essentially she's leaving a piece of her power and a piece of these kind of other consciousnesses in her mind behind. So she is much more like herself in those last few pages when she's getting on the ship. So I'm glad that we solved what I have called the all-knowing Kira problem. All in all, this book is really good. Here are my questions, my notes, the questions I have about book 2. Questions for the sequel. Will the plot of the second book be Kira just hunting down the 7 Maw? Because that would be epic, but I feel like there's gonna be more, which is actually the biggest reason that I want to read the second book of this, because there's no way we did all of this, just to have the second book have her be like, oops, I forgot about these 7 guys, let's go find them and kill them, blip, 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 you know? I don't know, there's gotta be more. Who was that man that said her family is still alive? He literally just like zooped by her in light speed space and told her, your family's alive. And then, yeah, who was that? That's gonna have to be explained, right? That was just so weird. Where is the Seeker? The Seeker is a scary alien that we meet for like 1 chapter. And they're like, oh my God, this thing is made of nightmares. Run, nothing can face it. Nothing can take it down. It's an ancient, super powerful creature made to defend the soft blade. And then we never see him again after that. So the Seeker has to be out there somewhere. My favorite character in the book was, at first it was not Kira. It took quite a while for me to adore Kira as much as I did at the end, for her to really, really grow in the last third of the book, in the second half of the book especially. My favorite character is definitely Grigorovich. So in this future sci-fi universe, we have ship minds, which are former human consciousnesses and brains adapted to be, you know, more than AI, but to be the consciousness of a ship. And Grigorovich is a foil character to Kira. So he goes through some insane stuff where he is abandoned and completely alone for 5 years, you know, on the brink of insanity as one of the smartest beings out there because he's a ship mind. Grigorovich is one of the only people who truly understands what Kira is going through for the whole book. And there are continual hints at that, of him being unstable. And he gets this whole arc of his own, which I really love because he is hilarious. Obviously, he's an incredibly witty character, and he understands Kira, and he makes it very clear that Kira is being dumb in a lot of instances. I really liked being able to watch this kind of intense character arc happen to someone other than Kira, right? You have this thing that is happening to him while all these things are happening to Kira as well. And you see both of them grow, and you see both of them bond together, and they both understand each other more than anyone else could. One of my favorite quotes actually from the book is from Grigorovich. The storm that batters, batters all. None are spared, not you, not I, not the stars in the sky. And this happens in a part of the book where Kira is really, really fighting against the soft blade and kind of refusing to accept that her and it are now one. She's having this kind of internal struggle, and Grigorovich, who is a little further ahead in his struggle, understands that he is living with his struggle and he is moving on, and the storm that batters all. You know, she is not the only one who is suffering, and wallowing in the guilt is something that she struggles with the whole book, that Grigorovich tries to hint at in his own, you know, kind of witty, dumb ways, that it's not worth it. All in all, I would say that this book is a giant puzzle that takes 800 pages to piece together. It's incredibly well written, incredibly well thought out. Every single character has a background, has a place that they come from, a culture that they come from. Each character has political values that they follow. They have different mannerisms and sayings, and it makes this world building so deep to be able to understand where each character comes from, that the aliens are different. We learn about how they're raised, how their culture is different. We learn about our main character and the things that she struggles with, and there is so much to this book. I genuinely have no idea how I'm going to edit this video because I don't think any of it's going to make any sense. But if you did not read this book along with me this time, I highly suggest that you do. This book is a thinker. This book is a thinker. It takes a lot of brain cells to make it through this book in a way that is really entertaining and incredibly rewarding as the pieces start to fall into place. And so, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini, I would give this book like 4.5 out of 5 stars. The only half a star that's missing is because like this much of the book, about this much of the book, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to keep reading or not. There's so much information that you need from this part of the book for the rest of it, but I really struggled a couple of times. But it completely paid off. It was completely worth it. So I still give it 4.5 out of 5 stars for me personally, but I'm also not picky. You will rarely see me rate a book below 4, probably, I would say, but that's just my thing. If you read this book, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you didn't read it, you should read it. It's very good. Thank you guys again for reading along with me. Thank you guys again for watching my video. My next video will be coming out in 2 weeks. And it's gonna be Iron Flame. After I did my first video on Fourth Wing, I was really excited to read this, and I am already done with it, so I am very excited to be doing this video for you guys as well. That'll be coming out in 2 weeks. And in 4 weeks from now, I will be talking about another series that I've heard a lot about that I'm excited to get into, which is Divine Rivals, and I'm also going to be going over the second book that will be coming out at the end of December. So I'll be reading both of those for my video in 4 weeks from now. Thank you guys again for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and happy reading. I'll see you next time.